Hello, folks, and welcome to Leaky Weekly, the show where we discuss the last week or so of news in the world of data leaks, cybercrime, and the dark web. Now, before we get started, a quick disclaimer that a lot of what we talk about comes from the word of threat actors themselves or from journalists on very emerging stories. So these kinds of things can change very rapidly. Details emerge, week to week. So be patient as they do and take all claims with a healthy degree of skepticism. That said, I'm your host, Nick. There may or may not be anything on these papers. I'll never tell. All right, for our first story, we've really got a tale of two ransomwares here. Europol has announced that 4 new arrests have been made in connection with LockBit, and a collective 15 Russian citizens have been sanctioned by the UK for their alleged role in the Evil Corp group. This is yet another product of Operation Kronos, at least the LockBit portion of this is, an international law enforcement effort that has the express goal of disrupting the LockBit ransomware group. All right, time for a quick history lesson here, because for some reason, I always pick the stories that have an obnoxious amount of background detail required. So Evil Corp has been active for a really long time. Officially, it formed in 2014 when its founding members released Dridex, which was a very pervasive piece of banking malware, and then evolved into a ransomware group. But the group had been kind of together for a while. Notably, they worked on Game Over Zeus together, which was another Trojan that, you guessed it, was heavily involved in, fill in the blank, banking malware. Now, Evil Corp went on to build Dridex after Game Over Zeus, which was primarily used as a, you guessed it, banking Trojan, and a rentable botnet. So kind of the early days of as-a-service options in the world of cybercrime. And then would later go on to deploy bit payment ransomware using Dridex as the first stage. Now, key members of the group split up in 2019. One goes on to develop Dopper Paymer ransomware, and the other goes on to develop Wasted Locker, a different ransomware strain. Now, one of these members, who went by the name Beverly, goes on to become a LockBit affiliate later, around 2022. So now here's the LockBit to Evil Corp connection. Now, separately, LockBit was being developed and released. It was first observed in September 2019. So this whole, Evil Corp tumultuous time was happening around the same time that LockBit was kind of making its way onto the scene. And from 2021 to 2023, the words LockBit and ransomware were pretty much synonymous. LockBit was by orders of magnitude the most popular and prolific flavor of ransomware. It was a pioneer sort of in the ransomware as a service model, which basically allows anyone with an internet connection to become a ransomware threat actor without having to do any of the heavy technical work of actually maintaining their own ransomware strain and infrastructure. So they had a popular affiliate program where people would pay to join, spread the ransomware on their own as affiliates, and then split any proceeds they got from ransoms with LockBit. That's how ransomware as a service works in general. And, LockBit hit everyone. As is common with RAS groups where affiliates do the infecting, they hit kind of every sector. Affiliates will focus themselves on individual sectors that they're experts in. So the range of victims you get is pretty wide. They hit education, governments, healthcare, banks, logistics, you name it. Their victim lists are extremely public, so you can certainly check on the coverage there. And then in early 2024, Operation Kronos embarked on a very large takedown of LockBit infrastructure. Later on in the year, they go on to name who they think LockBit Sup is, the administrator of LockBit. And they successfully removed 34 servers from the operation, a pretty big disruption at the time. And kind of ever since then with LockBit, things have been rocky. Sort of like ever since the end of tail end of 2019 for Evil Corp, things were pretty rocky for them then. And you kind of saw a breakup. Operation Kronos has now gone on to make more arrests in connection to the LockBit side of the house. And then the NCA separately, but very recently, published a deep dive into the identities and relationships of Evil Corp and announcing more sanctions on the list, basically. And this is kind of the sanctions are kind of the point of also unmasking LockBit Sup. So like I said before, 15 people were sanctioned by being named in this operation. So what does that mean? What does it mean when a government sanctions a person in the case of ransomware operations? Well, it means a payment to that party, and in effect, anything they're operating, any ransomware campaign they're operating, any business they're using to wash money, is illegal. So if you're a U.S. corporation, you can't pay the ransom without technically violating international sanctions. So people, they don't pay as long as they're aware of the sanctions. They don't pay the ransoms. They can't, and this hurts the group's revenue because the United States has always been a massive target. This hurts affiliate numbers because affiliates love targeting, Western corporations, and this affects the bottom line of a ransomware operation. Full stop. When you're sanctioned by the UK, several of them by the US, a lot of them by Australia, this can do a serious number on revenue. So between the arrests, the sanctions, the servers being confiscated, the research being published, this certainly shakes things up. Now, make no mistake, ransomware is still out there infecting companies. Ransoms are still being paid. Affiliates are still being recruited. But the ransomware underground being scattered and interrupted by these operations, it keeps affiliates and operators on their toes. So we'll see where this goes next. This is certainly not the last thing we'll hear from Operation Kronos. Now, last week, we discussed the very controversial ransomware incident that hit the city of Columbus, Ohio. So for our second story, we're going to talk about some of the budget that was recently approved and allocated. Okay, but before that, as a quick summary of what happened in Columbus, the city was hacked by Reseda. The city claimed that the data was corrupted and unusable by the threat actors. So there was no, they said, we're safe. This data was stolen, but cannot be employed in any malicious campaigns. An independent security researcher by the name of Connor Goodwolf came forward, indicating that the data was not corrupted, was usable, and was trivially easy to access. The city sued said researcher for causing a ruckus, that ruckus being the fact that they had unsuccessfully covered up what was a very serious ransomware incident. So the actual development here is that the city has expanded the budget for response to the hack, adding $3 million to an already approved $4 million, totaling the budget now around $7 million. So NBC4i speculates, and the tech leaders in Columbus also speculate that this is not the final cost, right? This is just kind of the beginning of the expenses. And this expenditure is overwhelmingly dedicated to figuring out what happened. So obviously, the amount of things that have to be done in relation to a ransomware incident as substantial as this one go far beyond the investigation itself. And most of these budgets, most of this is for immediate response and investigation. So let's break down the line items here. $2.4 million for system forensics, systems remediation, data mining, data forensics, and cyber threat monitoring. These services are helping to limit the extent of the cyber attack, understand what occurred, and ascertain what information was posted to the dark web by Reseda. We can take a number of things away from this. One, that current monitoring in place was not sufficient. So a friendly reminder to make sure that you've got logging in place such that if you are one day the victim of one of these ransomware campaigns, they can certainly hit anyone. It'll be easy for you to find your patient zero. Line item 2. Up to $1.6 million for Experian identity theft protection services, including credit and dark web monitoring. This budget is an estimate based on industry standard utilization rates for such service. The city's final estimates could fluctuate based on actual enrollments. The next line item, up to $1.9 million for legal counsel related to the incident response. The next item, up to $1 million for systems, endpoint, and cyber threat monitoring for long-term use by the city. The next item, up to $300,000 for legal counsel related to litigation. I wonder how much of that is for the Goodwolf fiasco. And the final item, up to $2,500 for expenses such as hard drives and tools. So the director for the Department of Technology said that these are set aside emergency funds being used here, and that this is really just the beginning. They also said that 22% of access systems still need to be restored. And this is not, the incident is not necessarily recent, so that's kind of an interesting observation that there are still decommissioned systems from the actual campaign itself. At least I assume that to mean that they are still infected with the actual, the encryptor, the ransomware strain that hit the devices. This, by the way, is what the ransom note for a device infected by Reseda looks like. So this is what the machines might be booting up to right now. This is available on the CISA page about Reseda, and I think there's a lot to learn here so far. One is, honestly, an idea of cost. They've spent $7 million so far. They claim this is just the beginning. And in that approval was $2.4 million just for the investigation. That's a lot. That's a lot of, that's a lot of man hours. That's a lot of consulting hours. It's a lot of forensic firm investigations. That's a lot of individuals doing deep log analysis, deep file and content inspection, malware reversing, actually, looking and seeding things around the dark web to figure out where this data went, who got it, who's involved. That is a lot of money for an investigation. Additionally, they got flamed pretty hard for this, for suing the security researcher, not for being infected by ransomware, right? That's like, it's no one's shaming anyone for getting infected by ransomware anymore. It's just, it's an everyday occurrence. This was clearly not the right way to go about it, especially when the security researcher was trying to correct the record and share the reality of the incident with the public. So this is, take note, this is not a good way to interact with the world of security research. If you're wrong about the impact of a breach, apologize, correct the record yourself, acknowledge it, and move on. And don't shoot the messenger necessarily. Now, the point of the city is not that he had to interact, not just that he had to interact with the criminal element and be a sophisticated actor to access this data, which I have asserted I find personally to be a bogus claim. This is a Tor browser download and 4 clicks away from being accessible by anyone with a laptop. But the thing they also allege is that he caused undue panic, with his sharing of the information to the public. Now, I think in this case, it simply was not undue, especially when the city's claim that he was correcting was that the data was corrupted. Connor Goodwolf came forward and said, this is not corrupted. This data is a few clicks away. It is trivial to access, and it absolutely impacts the public. So I think in this case, one, try not to make the messenger's job necessary. Due diligence on the leak itself, inspect the data, see what the impact is, and own it. And secondly, don't shoot the messenger. For our third story, the Dutch police have announced the arrest of 2 administrators of the Bohemia market, as well as its sister market that was focused on cannabis, Cannabia. One of them appeared in court in Rotterdam, one of the administrators, on October 8th. The suspect is from Ireland, so this is a little bit of sort of European extradition going on. Now, the market here, Bohemia, was primarily a drug market, but also supported all of the sort of expected products, fake IDs, forged checks, malware, DDoS botnets, all of the kind of usual suspects. And this was a big market. It's said by the Dutch police in an article they just put out that it processed 82,000 transactions every month. And on its busiest month in September 2023, did about 12 million euros in revenue. And most notably, officially as of April of this year, they exit scammed. So in late 2023, the site was inaccessible, and they started reporting a rogue developer withdrawing small amounts of Bitcoin. That was their apology, basically, that a rogue developer was stealing funds from the website. They were switching away from accepting Bitcoin and over to XMR. A lot of users got suspicious. You can read threads about it on Reddit, on Dread, that the administrators were ripping off some people and not all. In April of 2024, it was sort of understood that they had exit scammed. Now, the arrest itself of the administrators is not new information. That happened in August. But the seizure of assets does appear to be recent. The old Onion link to Bohemia is now live again and displays this law enforcement banner. Now, this law enforcement banner also contains a link to a different Onion site that hosts a web page listing individuals. These were prominent usernames, kind of well known among the dark web markets world. And the list of usernames have countries assigned to them and are notably listed under the word arrested. And these are from, these are users from all over the world who have I think it's being alleged here that they've been thrown in jail. For now, there is no accompanying articles. There's no information on the people connected to the usernames on this list. I don't know if they were arrested last year, last month, or yesterday, but I've spot checked a lot of these usernames and haven't found any stories or press releases or articles posted by law enforcement that reference them. I'm not entirely sure what this page is, and I will certainly keep the Leaky Weekly audience updated with details. I'm eager to find out, and I hope I do soon. And for our final story, 1/3 of the US population's background information is now public. Now, this story should sound familiar after the staggering leak of National Public Data's database of personal records, which included social security numbers, addresses, all of the things one would not want out there for identity theft, which also impacted, more likely than not, hundreds of millions of individuals. But I regret to inform you that this is completely unrelated. Researchers at Cyber News discovered a publicly accessible database with no authentication of any kind sitting in front of it, being hosted by a company called MC2 Data. Now, MC2 Data is a parent company that allows users to run public record search and background check searches among its many subsidiaries and hosts all of the data one would ever expect when running a background check. Think names, email addresses, personal addresses, phone numbers, property records, employment history, legal records, and several other data points of that type. And additionally, in this leak was the database of users of the service, exposing the IP address, user agent, encrypted password, email, partial payment information of the over 2 million people who had ever purchased a background check from MC2. Now, MC2 Data owns a bunch of background check companies, privaterecords.net, Private Reports, People Searcher, People Search USA, and some others. And this was a similar situation with NPD. There seems to be a trend here among background check companies that they have a bunch of like sister companies or subsidiaries or companies owned by some kind of conglomerate that literally all do the same thing. And it's like their domains are typo squatting each other. Like they all are almost the same. People Searcher, People Search USA, Private Records Search, Private Reports, privaterecords.net. They're all like the same with slight variations. And I don't know what the deal is with that. They all have their own SEO to make sure that they pop up, but they're owned by the same company and they do literally the exact same thing with the slightest variation in UI and UX. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but an interesting observation in the background check product space. Now, Cyber News also claimed that they contacted MC2 multiple times and received no response. However, before they published the article, access to the database had been secured. I assume that means either removed from the internet or at least placed behind some form of authentication. But there's no guarantee that this data got into the hands of bad actors necessarily. This isn't a story where I'm saying the data set is trading hands on a cybercrime forum. This is a security research team that found it exposed, reported it, and published an article after giving notice to the company. However, what I can say with relative confidence is that for every journalist or researcher looking for exposed databases, there are more cyber criminals. And not all of them publish that data when they find it. These things sometimes are just exchanged within groups. The affected company, journalists, the general public are completely unaware that these databases have been compromised and are being shared kind of privately behind the scenes because there's no splash about it. Now, here's the thing with leaks like this. A lot of the information is already a matter of public record, especially with this data set. A lot of this is a few Google searches away on a wide variety of public records platforms. But that doesn't mean leaks like this aren't impactful. The compiling and sort of like easy consumption of this data in a nice parsable JSON format that it was stored in this database makes it pretty trivial to employ to automate campaigns around for all the cybercrime things you can imagine, auto dialing, bot campaigns, phishing operations. This kind of data serves a wide variety of use cases, especially when it's super easy to consume in a pre-found, pre-parsed, downloadable database format. So again, As of now, no one is reporting that this data is for sale or really even necessarily compromised, simply that it has been exposed. And that from at least August 7th, the time of them finding it, to September 25th, and who knows how long before they found it, it has been available to the public. Well, with that said, folks, those are the stories for this week. Today's show was brought to you by Flare. Well, every show is brought to you by Flare, the world's easiest to use and most comprehensive cybercrime dataset that integrates into your security program in 30 minutes. Sign up for our free trial, linked in the podcast description below, to try it yourself. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you on the next one.